The summer of 1945 was hot in Japan. The air hung heavy over Hiroshima. The cicadas sang as if nothing had changed, and the people, ordinary men, women, and children, moved through their days with a strange mix of exhaustion and fragile hope. The war had dragged on for years. Cities lay in ruins from relentless bombings. Food was scarce. Rumors swirled that something was coming, something decisive. But no one could imagine what. In Washington, far from the rubble-strewn streets of Japan, men in tailored suits met behind closed doors. For years, the United States had been racing against time and secrecy to build a weapon unlike any in human history. In the deserts of New Mexico, that weapon had just been tested, an explosion so powerful it turned sand to glass and lit the night sky brighter than the sun. The scientists called it the gadget. The military called it the ultimate weapon. To the president, Harry S. Truman, it was the means to end the war swiftly and on American terms. On the night of August 5th, 1945, the order was given. The Enola Gay, a B-29 Superfortress bomber, sat on the tarmac of Tinian Island, its engines silent but ready. In its bomb bay rested a single device, codenamed Little Boy. It was about 10 feet long, weighed over 4 tons, and carried the destructive force of over 15,000 tons of TNT. The crew knew it was powerful. They didn't know exactly what it would do to a city full of people. At 2:45 a.m., the engines roared to life. The Enola Gay lifted into the humid Pacific air, its course set for a city 1,500 miles away. Hiroshima slept, unaware. By morning, the sky over the city was a perfect blue. School children lined up for morning exercises. Street vendors began setting up stalls. Housewives opened their windows to let in the fresh air. At 8:15 a.m., the people of Hiroshima looked up. Some saw a small silver plane glinting in the sunlight. Others saw the sudden bloom of a parachute, confused, curious, unaware it carried the weapon that would change the world. The next second, the sun seemed to explode on Earth. A blinding flash engulfed the city, followed by a shockwave so intense it ripped buildings from their foundations. Temperatures at the hypocenter soared to over 4,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to vaporize human flesh instantly. People vanished, leaving only their shadows burned into stone walls. Within seconds, Hiroshima was a hellscape. Fires erupted across miles, feeding on the rubble. Those who survived the initial blast stumbled through the streets, skin hanging in ribbons, eyes clouded with burns, voices hoarse from screaming. Black rain began to fall, carrying ash, soot, and invisible poison. The city was gone. Back in the Enola Gay, the crew watched the mushroom cloud rise into the sky, towering over the ruins. Some were silent, some cheered. None of them truly knew what they had unleashed. News of Hiroshima's destruction reached Tokyo within hours. But even as the Japanese leadership struggled to comprehend it, the United States prepared the next step. 3 days later, on August 9th, another B-29 boxcar took to the skies. Its target was Kokura, but clouds and smoke from earlier bombings obscured the city. The plane turned toward its secondary target, Nagasaki. In Nagasaki, the morning had begun like any other. Workers headed to factories. Children walked to school. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb bay doors opened. Fat Man fell a larger, more complex weapon than the one that had destroyed Hiroshima. When it detonated, the explosion ripped through the Urakami Valley. The city's hills contained the blast, magnifying its destructive power. Over 40,000 people died instantly. Thousands more would die in the days and months that followed. For Japan, the message was clear: surrender or face complete annihilation. For the world, the atomic age had begun. In the days after the bombings, doctors faced horrors they had never imagined. People who seemed uninjured collapsed suddenly, bleeding from their gums, their hair falling out in clumps. Children developed fevers that no medicine could cure. The survivors, later called hibakusha, or scars, physical and invisible, that would last a lifetime. And yet, amid the ashes, life clung stubbornly on. In Hiroshima, a single camphor tree near the blast center sprouted new leaves within weeks. In Nagasaki, church bells rang again, but nothing, no sound, no sight could erase the moment when human beings learned they could destroy entire cities with a single bomb. 80 years have passed since that summer, and still, the shadow of the mushroom cloud hangs over the world. Japan's government met in a room heavy with silence. The emperor's advisors, military leaders, and ministers sat around the table. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not just military disasters. They were proof that an entirely new form of warfare had emerged. The military faction wanted to fight on, hoping to negotiate better terms or force the Allies into a stalemate. But reality was closing in. Soviet forces had just invaded Manchuria. The Pacific blockade strangled the country's supply lines. Now, in the span of 3 days, 2 cities had been erased. In the early hours of August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito recorded a message to his people. His voice, calm yet strained, carried words no Japanese ruler had ever spoken. The war must end. For many, the meaning was clear long before the translation reached them. The broadcast, scratchy and distant, was heard in homes across Japan. He spoke of a new and most cruel bomb and the unbearable toll of continued war. At noon, his message went out over the radio. For the first time in history, the voice of the emperor reached the ordinary citizen. Crowds stood in streets, frozen. Some wept, some collapsed in disbelief. Others felt a strange emptiness, as if the ground beneath them had shifted. The war was over, but the suffering was not. In the days that followed, Allied occupation forces landed on Japanese shores. They expected devastation, but the reality stunned even seasoned soldiers. In Hiroshima, the city center was nothing but a flat expanse of rubble, broken only by the skeletal remains of a few concrete buildings. The air still carried a faint metallic taste, the smell of burned wood and flesh lingering in the ruins. Survivors wandered aimlessly, some searching for lost family, others staring into space, their eyes hollow. In Nagasaki, rescue workers dug through debris with bare hands, pulling out bodies many unrecognizable. The wounded filled makeshift hospitals. Supplies were scarce. Radiation sickness, still poorly understood, claimed lives daily. People would seem to recover, only to fall ill again. Doctors noticed strange burns that didn't heal, fevers that grew worse over time, and bleeding that could not be stopped. The hibakusha became living witnesses to a new kind of weapon one that killed not just in an instant, but slowly, invisibly. Internationally, the reactions were complex. In the United States, newspapers hailed the atomic bomb as the weapon that ended the war and saved countless American lives by avoiding an invasion of Japan. Headlines spoke of triumph, of technological mastery, of a new dawn for mankind. But in the scientific community, unease spread. Many of the very people who had built the bomb now questioned whether it should have been used at all. Some argued it was necessary to shock Japan into surrender. Others believed the nation was already on the brink, and that the demonstration of such a weapon could have been done on an uninhabited site. The debate would last decades. In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin watched closely. The bomb was more than a military tool. It was a political message. The balance of power had shifted, and the world had entered a dangerous new era. Within 4 years, the Soviets would test their own atomic weapon, ending America's monopoly and igniting the nuclear arms race. For the survivors, the early post-war years were a struggle against not only physical pain, but also social stigma. Many hibakusha were shunned, feared to be contagious, or avoided because of their injuries. Jobs were hard to find. Marriage prospects evaporated. Yet, amid the discrimination, a quiet movement began to grow. Survivors began telling their stories, not as an act of vengeance, but as a plea. They wanted the world to understand what atomic war meant. They described the blinding light, the searing heat, the desperate cries of the injured. They spoke of children wandering alone, calling for parents who would never answer. They talked about the black rain, the choking dust, the thirst that could not be quenched. And they warned, if this weapon were ever used again, it would be the end of humanity. The American occupation brought changed new laws, democratic reforms, and the slow rebuilding of cities. But it also brought censorship. For years, photographs, films, and detailed reports about Hiroshima and Nagasaki were suppressed, hidden from the public eye. It was as if the world wasn't ready to look directly at what had been done. Still, the ruins themselves told the truth. The skeletal dome of Hiroshima's Industrial Promotion Hall, one of the few structures left standing near the hypocenter, became a silent monument. In Nagasaki, the shattered walls of Urakami Cathedral stood as a reminder of the blast's fury. Slowly, these places would become symbols not of defeat, but of survival. By the 1950s, the Cold War was tightening its grip on the world. The United States and the Soviet Union amassed nuclear arsenals capable of destroying the planet many times over. Tests lit up remote atolls with artificial suns, their shockwaves traveling for hundreds of miles. Governments assured their people these weapons were a necessary deterrent. But in Japan, the hibakusha knew better. They had seen what one bomb could do. They had lived through the aftermath. And they knew that if these weapons were used again, there would be no survivors to tell the tale. 80 years later, their voices still echo in classrooms, in memorial halls, in quiet interviews with journalists who sit, tape recorders running, as elderly survivors recall the moment their world ended. Some speak with tears, others with a calm born of having told the story countless times. But all carry the same message. Remember. Remember what happened in August 1945. Remember what the atomic bomb truly is. And above all, make sure it never happens again. The decades after 1945 unfolded like a shadow stretching across the world. The atomic bomb was no longer just an American weapon. The Soviet Union tested its first device in 1949. Britain followed in 1952, then France, then China. By the 1960s, mushroom clouds had bloomed over deserts, oceans, and remote islands dozens of times. Each test was framed as progress, as proof of power, as a shield against enemies. But for those who had walked through the ruins of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, every detonation was a reminder that the clock was ticking toward a possible end. In Japan, the survivors watched the news of these tests with a quiet, sickening familiarity. They recognized the flash. They knew the shockwave. And though the test sites were far from cities, the principle was the same. Humanity was perfecting its ability to annihilate itself. Hiroshima and Nagasaki rebuilt slowly. Streets reappeared where once there had been only ashes. Schools reopened. Families resettled. The atomic dome in Hiroshima was left standing deliberately as the city around it grew modern and vibrant. It became not just a ruin, but a warning its twisted steel and shattered concrete preserved exactly as they were in the moment after the blast. In Nagasaki, the cathedral was rebuilt, but the scorched fragments of the old walls were placed beside it, so that memory would live alongside renewal. The survivors aged. Many never spoke of their experiences. Others dedicated their lives to telling them, traveling abroad to speak in universities, parliaments, and town halls. They carried photographs, sketches, sometimes just their words. It was not war, one survivor said to a hushed audience in New York. It was hell, made by human hands. The Cold War brought moments when that hell nearly returned. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 pushed the world to the brink. In those tense days, the hibakusha feared they would see another mushroom cloud before their lives ended. But diplomacy pulled the world back. Treaties were signed, some to limit testing, others to control the spread of weapons. And yet the stockpiles grew. The weapons became larger, more efficient, more devastating. Hiroshima's bomb, once unmatched, was now tiny compared to the megaton warheads that slept in missile silos. In 1985, 40 years after the bombings, the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki sent delegations to the United Nations. Their message was simple: no city should ever endure what we endured. They brought survivors to speak directly to diplomats. Some listened with tears, others with polite detachment. Global politics moved slowly, but the moral weight of their testimony was undeniable. In the decades that followed, August 6th and August 9th became days of remembrance, marked by solemn ceremonies. Thousands gathered at the Peace Memorial Park in Hiroshima, where paper lanterns floated down the Motoshiasu River, carrying messages for the dead. In Nagasaki, the Peace Park filled with white doves released into the air, their wings catching the light of the summer sun. As the 20th century closed, a new generation began to inherit the memory. Children too young to know war listened to their grandparents' stories. Teachers in Japan took students to the museums where charred lunchboxes, melted glass bottles, and burned clothing were displayed behind glass. The exhibits were not just about history. They were about survival, about the responsibility of the living to the dead. Outside Japan, the bombings became symbols in debates about war, peace, and power. Some saw them as necessary acts that ended a brutal conflict. Others saw them as the beginning of an age of fear. Both agreed. The technology now existed to erase humanity in an afternoon. The 21st century brought new challenges. Terrorism, rogue states, and renewed tensions between major powers kept the nuclear question alive. Disarmament talks stalled. Some countries withdrew from treaties. New nuclear weapons were tested. And yet, amid the political gridlock, Hiroshima and Nagasaki remained steadfast in their message. Every August, the bells toll. The speeches repeat the vow: no more Hiroshimas, no more Nagasakis. Survivors, now in their 80s and 90s, still stand before microphones, their voices thinner, but their conviction unshaken. They know their time is running out. They speak so that when they are gone, their memories will remain. 80 years have passed since the blinding light over Hiroshima and the firestorm in Nagasaki. The cities are alive now, filled with commuters, students, festivals, and laughter. The scars are harder to see, but they are there, in the stories passed down, in the monuments that stand against the skyline, in the quiet moments when someone touches a name engraved in stone. The world has changed in 8 decades. Technology has advanced. Nations have risen and fallen. Yet the mushroom cloud still casts its shadow. The lesson remains urgent, that human beings, for all their brilliance, must never again use that brilliance to bring about their own destruction. Because if it happens once more, there may be no one left to tell the story. The camera would slowly pull back from the Peace Memorial Park, the lanterns floating gently on the dark water. In the distance, the city lights shimmer, bright and alive. The narrator's voice fades with one final line. The memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is not just about the past. It is a warning to the future. And whether the world heeds it is up to us.